Everyone, welcome to Faith Greater Than Fear. We have another great episode with you today. And we have a great guest that I've known for a long time. We actually both grew up overseas in Taiwan. I believe some people would call us eggs, white on the outside, yellow on the inside, if you understand that reference. Just growing up in Asia in that way. Both love Taiwan. Neither of us have worked there or lived there for a little while, but roots are strong. And so it's going to be a great experience getting to know Micah and what he's doing lately. So I just want to ask Micah, would you go ahead and introduce yourself now?
My name's Micah Foreman. Nathaniel and I have known each other for a long time. I married to my wife, Justine. We have three kids, Avery, Isley, and Eli. They're 10, 9, and 6. We work for a organization called Scriptures in Use. And specifically, we travel around internationally and here in the States and train people how to use the oral arts, oral tools, and storytelling to integrate those into their ministries and their faith and their personal life, and really model that after the way Jesus did his ministry. And so there's a lot that goes into that. But we kind of discovered that when we were workers in northern Vietnam, and worked with a tribal group up there, and just realized how oral they were, this oral tradition that permeated their whole culture and history. And we realized that we were woefully unprepared by Christian ministry to even engage that in an appropriate way. And so that started us down the rabbit hole, if you will, to discover and really learn to value and hold place for oral culture, oral tradition. And during that journey, realized how much of a blessing it was just to ourselves and our family and just to people that we knew. So, that's just the nutshell version of who we are and what we're doing.
So practicing this kind of orality, I guess is the word you use. It's a way to be culturally relevant, but you're actually finding that it's very beneficial to those that aren't really from an oral tradition as much as well.
Yeah. Well, the long and short of it is that we all started off as oral culture people when we were little. And gradually, depending on our context, we had to integrate more Western book culture type learning or thinking, depending on what schools we went to or what communities that we were a part of. But what we find is that when we engage that storytelling and the oral arts, it really taps into the roots that I believe are deep inside everyone. And some people have not tapped into those for a long time. Some people still do it on a regular basis, depending on their context. But it's been a real joy to integrate this into my relationships, even here in the States with my own generation, especially with the unchurched crowd. And I have yet to have a negative reaction to it. And people are really drawn in by story. And I just am constantly reminded of how brilliant Jesus was and how much of a master teacher he was. And I think we forget that there's power in some of that simplicity. And every time I kind of pay attention to the way he did things, I see the Holy Spirit move, which is awesome.
So you are used to going around and doing these trainings in person, but obviously COVID-19 has had something to do with that lately. So
Yep.
describe to us now exactly what life looks like, how you're continuing those trainings.
Yeah. Well, it's been interesting because most of our particular ministry is overseas. Obviously international travel has been postponed right now. But what's been really awesome is that the nature of our training is we train people. And the goal is for them to be able to do this themselves first as practitioners, but then to be able to train other people. And so there's a really high focus on them not being dependent on us being there. And after a certain amount of time with us, they're able to go and reproduce the training that we give them. And so all throughout these international countries, it's been a mixed bag. It's been really hard. We've been able to help them out with just some funding to even stay alive and then get food. but they have been pushing forward on their own, which has been incredible. One of our partners in a Southeast Asian country, his network of leaders, they had been reporting that they had been memorizing so many, some of them 20, 30 stories over the lockdown, and family members were coming to Jesus because they were a captive audience. They couldn't go anywhere because of the lockdown. And these storytellers and these trainers were going, when this lockdown lifts, we want to be ready. We realized that we didn't have enough of these stories memorized. And so they're just doing them with their families. And so lots of amazing stories like that coming out, them helping their communities. Here in the States, it's all just gone virtual. And that we've been doing lots of trainings over Zoom, lots of meetings over Zoom. And it kind of makes me die inside as an extrovert. You know, the fact that you and I are having this interview over Zoom kind of kills me a little bit. I'd rather be having it face to face, but it has opened up so many opportunities. And that's the thing that's been crazy, is this has forced us to go down some paths that I don't think we would have chosen naturally. They're harder, and yet it's really opening up this way of thinking, this paradigm shift for how we approach ministry and how we even approach our relationship with Jesus. It's opening up to people that would never be able to take the training. We've been doing 1 days, 3 days, 5 days, and even some of that 5-day training, spreading it out 1 day each weekend. And this is making it accessible to way more people that would never be able to travel to a location, take 5 days out. And so that's been really exciting to see, even just the common lay person, if you will, getting access to this training and just taking it and running with it in their own lives, in their own small groups, in their own neighborhoods. And so it's been hard doing everything virtually, but I'm realizing that God is really stretching us and making this available to a lot more people that would normally not be able to have access to it.
So do you find, and I think you touched on this just a little bit, but do you find that the virtual meetings get in the way of kind of that oral give and take that some of these cultures are used to? I mean, especially when you're working with a training that might be overseas, if you're doing much of that right now, do you see that happening, or mostly have you been able to overcome kind of the Zoom barrier?
So it's something that we've been working on with our international partners, and it's interesting, the real grassroots kind of foot soldier, if you will, or boots on the ground, especially if they're poor, if they're really oral, like if their literacy is maybe just functional, they have a lot harder time with this format. And so this Zoom format internationally has had to be done to reinforce existing trainers, maybe the ones that are a little bit more educated, and then as they're able to pass this on or to do mentoring or coaching via phone call or something, the Zoom format is more difficult. But it also, depending on how technologically comfortable someone is, that can be a big holdup. And here in the States, it's not a big problem. And so we've been using it a lot more here. We're working on what our partners overseas need in order to be able to do this. There are some lockdowns that are lifting up. They're able to do things with smaller groups, which is not a bad thing anyways. So we're actively looking at, hey, you know what? This may change. I mean, we're probably not going back to status quo. So how are we going to keep pushing forward and moving forward over the next year or two when this is still with us? Not to be naysayers or whatever, but if this doesn't go away, we can't assume that things are going to go back to the way they were. And so how are we going to run forward with this? But there is a really cool thing when you're doing storytelling church. We do Zoom church. And so everyone has their little screens and gallery view. And one of the things that we do is, I won't go into it, our format, but we go through the story a lot. The storyteller retells it a lot. We ask questions through the story. And then one of the things that we do is we actually will dramatize the story. And so initially we're like, how do we do this on Zoom? But we just kind of ran with it, and everyone, took different characters in this story in each box. And what we found, and people did this on their own, is they would change, how you can change the background, right, in your Zoom? They would change the background of their Zoom box to match their character. If they were a farmer, they would put like a wheat field in the back. If they were sick, they just all these kinds of things. I think one of my friends, was one of the notorious sinners, or the infamous sinners in the calling of Matthew, and he had this gangster, kind of behind, him, and it was just, and everyone really connected to it, enjoyed it, and I don't know how much it affects the emotional reaction of the story, but it was memorable. There's lots of laughter, and there is connection over it, and so just really impressed with the creativity and the flexibility of people to still come together and learn and fellowship virtually, and so and these Zoom churches will have people from all over the U.S. patching in, which is really awesome, and it's not just them patching in to watch someone preach. Like, this is them coming together, and it's very interactive, every member participating, and so very and you walk away knowing the story, which is awesome. So
I know last year at ICOM, I was able to be not a part of, but watch you do one of your workshops there. And you really, I think, approached it in a very genuine way, probably how you usually do it, with all of us there at ICOM, going through the story, learning that, and eventually getting to that moment of reenacting. And at the end, last 20 minutes or whatever, people basically just sharing these observations that they never come up with before, after having familiarized themselves with that. So that was amazing, first of all. So just to say how Scripture works in that way and continue to work throughout our lives, the same stories revealing new things to us is very cool. And I know it's a big part of what you do. But talking about interesting backgrounds, I know you and your family made a kind of a big change, I think, earlier this year. And so your background right now is pretty unique. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So my family and I got to be in Indonesia last year for like 4 months, and we were doing this training all throughout Indonesia. Incredible experience as a family. My wife had pushed to try this and say, "You're always traveling. We want to be a part of your ministry too. We want to meet the people you meet. We want to have faces behind these names. And want the kids to not just view ministry as dad going away for 3 weeks at a time, and it's horrible, and it's really, really hard." So we tried that, went to Indonesia, and we had been there like a month, and my wife was like, she's like, "So don't be angry, but what if we sold our house, moved into an RV so that we could go with you whenever, and then keep going with you overseas and travel in the States?" And I was pretty shocked, but she said I could have a truck if we got the deal, so that sealed it for me. But so we put our house up for sale beginning of February. It closed, and we signed everything middle of March, right before, I think it was like 2 weeks before lockdown started to happen. And they closed all the national parks, all the campgrounds in that initial lockdown. So we had to go up to Nebraska to Justine's folks. But the goal, we're living in an RV, fifth wheel, have a truck and everything. And the goal of it, the reason we did it before, was we knew that if I wasn't traveling overseas, we wanted to be sharing this and doing trainings here in the States. And the big heart behind that is that every single partner, every single network that we see really jump in the deep end with these oral tools and this orality, it literally unlocks the masses, the people that would normally sit on a Sunday morning and watch the pastor preach and go, "Wow, that was amazing. I should bring my friend to church next Sunday." Those people that feel like they're on the sidelines, which is probably, I don't know, 80-90% of people that go to church, it unlocks them to be major players in the kingdom. And so we see this happening overseas. I see this incredible phenomenon. And in my heart of hearts, I'm going, I want my people to experience this. And so the reason we sold our house, moved to an RV, was we wanted to be completely flexible. We wanted to be completely available. Wherever there's a training here in the States, I wanted to be able to go. And I didn't want to have to leave my family. Wanted my kids and wife to be a part of this. And COVID hit. So there's no one's doing meetings. Churches are still figuring out how to meet. But we've started and continued to do virtual trainings and stuff. And so we're actually going to be doing one at the end of October, a full 5-day, Monday through Friday, and going to be a part of that. But even though things have kind of not gone the way we thought, we're still learning how to do this live and do it well. So we moved into our RV mid-January. So what has it been? 7 months. And so we love it. I mean, there are good and bad things about it, but we're flexible, and it's been a real joy as our family to be able to do this. And we don't know how long we're going to do it. We'll do it until it doesn't make sense, but we want to be available. We want to be flexible. We don't want, if there's an opportunity for us to go train a church or a network or a sitting organization or a refugee ministry or whatever it is, we want to be able to do that and not have it be that or family. And so this is our way of combining those two and go, ministry and family are happening at the same time, and they're both happening really well, really holistically. And so it sounds crazy, and definitely may not have been the best year to do this because everyone is out camping. Like, that's the only thing to do here in the States. If you want to get out of your house, you can't go to the movie. Well, let's go camping. So it's been crazy trying to compete for campsites and stuff, but yeah, never a dull moment.
Well, I know that's particularly true a few months ago. I know you guys have had a chance to visit some places around the country, have some fun. But a few months ago, I know you had a story. This program is called Faith Greater Than Fear. I think it definitely plays into that. So would you go ahead and share some of that story with us?
Yeah, we were because of the quarantine. We had been up in Nebraska, and on Justine's land, her folks' land, and the last day. So we were leaving the next day. The last day, we were kind of celebrating, and we were out on some farmland. And all her family was there, and we were all riding 4-wheelers and ATVs, razors, those kinds of things around. I've been doing it all weekend, and the last morning before we were packing up, everyone was kind of making. We had like little tracks and different things, and had a blast all weekend. And then we took one last loop, and I was driving in the Razor with Justine and Eli, and we weren't going fast, and went to turn. And as we were turning, our back tire hit a rut or a bump or something, and we flipped. And Justine and Eli fell out as we were flipping, and then it rolled over on its top and then began to roll. And I was still tumbling around inside. Then it didn't quite make it on top, and then it rolled back towards Justine, and she pushed Eli out of the way, and it fell right on her back. And then I came around, and one of the tires was on Eli's arm, and I lifted it up with my shoulder off of him, and Justine ended up breaking. I think we didn't know what was happening. She was on her stomach. She couldn't move. She could barely breathe, and called the ambulance. Took them like 45 minutes to get there because they had an argument about jurisdiction. So there's an ambulance that came, and another ambulance from another county said, no, that's ours, and sent them back. And it was crazy. But that was probably one of the scariest moments. And then I think it was even more traumatic because we had like the whole family there. Like a couple people saw it, and everyone was standing around, and Justine was on her stomach. And I remember in that moment, didn't know what was in that moment. I was thinking, this is quite possibly a game changer here. My wife may not walk, or we may lose her. And her lung was punctured by one of the broken ribs, and her right lung was full of blood and fluid. So even she was life flighted to a bigger hospital. And this was still during the COVID lockdown. And so called the hospital, and they're like, they said, yeah, you can't come. But it was interesting thinking about the COVID restriction for the hospital lifted actually the next day. And so that first night, which was the worst night, that first night she was there by herself. But I remember thinking in my mind, I'm like, oh yeah, everyone that's had like a normal hospital or emergency or surgery or anything, they haven't been able to be there for their family. And I was thinking back, Justine was in the hospital for 5, 6 days, and I remember just thinking this would have been horrible if I wouldn't have been able to been with her. But ambulance finally got there, went and took all the X-rays, MRIs. So she had broke all like 6, 7 ribs along her spine. Actually hit one of her spine has these little fins on the back. Actually, like chipped off. Actually hit her spine in one spot, but didn't do any damage. But the doctor said uh, if she was 60, she wouldn't make it. But she's not a smoker. She's young, seems to be healthy. So we're going to hope that that lung bounces back, because it was literally smashed, and lots of bruising on the lung. And so we got everyone praying on our network. We had people in Indonesia praying. We had people in Iran praying. One of our guys in Indonesia actually trained some people in Iran. So just had all kinds of people around the world praying. And that first 24 hours, when they x-rayed her again, her right lung was completely clear. And she hadn't coughed once. There had been no active coughing or any kind of fluid that came out. So that was, in our minds, was a real big answer to prayer, miracle. But I remember like that moment where I was looking at the situation. My wife was on the ground. She was in so much pain, and just going, all right, whatever comes. And I remember feeling this peace of knowing that this is probably going to change everything. And Justine, ironically, had a really cool moment that first night in the hospital. She was in so much pain, she couldn't, they actually had the neck brace on upside down. The little EMTs in Nebraska hadn't put it on right. They were volunteers. God bless their hearts. But it was digging in, and she didn't sleep like the first night and was just terrified. And they didn't know. She could barely breathe, just the shallow breaths. But, we feel like the Lord spared Eli's life. And So she was just sitting there just thinking, she's like, man, it's a miracle that I didn't die. Or she's just kind of talking to Jesus. And the conversation she had with him was, and she felt like he said, that's not the miracle. The miracle will be when you and I finally get to be face to face. But right now, I still have people that I need you to be me too. And kind of gave new meaning to live is Christ, to die is gain, or whichever way it goes. But it's like, yeah, if you would have passed away, your kids would have been okay. Micah would have been okay. And that would have been the truly miraculous moment when you and I finally get to be face to face, something that you've longed for. But you're still alive, which means you still get to be me. And I truly believe that, that peace that passes understanding, that we would have been okay. We would have lost her, and it would have been hard, but it wouldn't have been meaningless. It wouldn't have been, and I think that's the amazing thing about trusting him, because that's what it comes down to, is you can't trust someone you don't know, right? We talk about trusting Jesus, but it's pretty hard to trust him if you don't know him and don't talk to him and don't have a relationship with him. But if you have a relationship with someone and something crappy happens, then you can give them the benefit of the doubt if you know them. And I think that's so important in our walk with Jesus, is to really know him and to know him and spend time with him. And during the hard times when that storm hits or whatever, you're actually going to be able to follow in the midst of unknowing, follow in the midst of fear. And you can't do that with someone that is a distant God, right? You can't do that with someone that you kind of have beef with, because you're gonna see things through a different lens. And so Yeah, it was incredible time. The Lord really came through and provided. But we definitely felt that moment where, that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, where they're like, we know God can save us, but even if he doesn't, we're still going to follow him, and just kind of that in the moment when all this was happening, we felt like the Holy Spirit came in and allowed us to have kind of that posture. And we know it's easy to say, looking back on it, when we didn't lose her, but those moments when it was all happening were very telling and very powerful, so.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. I think that's going to bless a lot of people. That I know a lot of people have already been involved in that story praying, but for those that have a chance to hear this, I think they're going to be very blessed by it. So Micah, thanks for being with us today. I think we're going to go ahead and land this plane. You've given us so much to think about. So appreciate your time. Everybody at home, thanks for joining us as well. Please share this if you appreciate it, if it blesses you. Please share with others. We also have this available as a podcast, so please check that out online and our blog on GNPI.org that goes along with this series of interviews. So, Micah, thanks once again. Thanks, everybody at home. We'll see you next time on Faith Greater Than Fear.